Hi, I'm Michael Johnston. I'm the Software Portfolio Product Manager for Fluke, and today I'm going to be showing you some of what is coming up in our launch of CalStudio, our new software for calibration and running your Cal lab across all measurement disciplines in one single system. First area we're going to look at is our dashboards. And right now in the initial launch, we're not going to have a fully implemented dashboard, but eventually this will have widgets that we can drop in here and configure to show KPIs and metrics that are most important to us. But here today we're seeing just a list of what assets we have coming due, what assets are out for service, and this will live update. So as I log into the system, I can see immediately what's important to me. And as we grow the functionality here over time, which is one of the great benefits of having a cloud-based software, is it's much easier for us to develop new features and roll those out over a much more rapid time frame than what we've done historically, without needing any kind of update to be installed. So I'm going to come in here, and the first thing I'm going to show you is looking at my company. So the company is my organization inside of CalStudio, and we have this great infinite tree view on the left-hand side here, where we can configure our own company with all of the organizational structures and regions and facilities that we think about our own company with. And what that allows us to do is be really specific about where assets reside, who they belong to, where users belong in terms of that organizational structure, and really create a clear picture of where all these pieces fit together. And so we can look here at our example where we've got these different facilities that are part of our company, but I can come in here and add, for example, a group, which could be just a generic folder or a group of sites or a site or a region, right? So I'm going to create my region here for America's region. And I save that. And then inside of that region, maybe I have a operation where I manufacture things. So this could be my Everett site, or my Everett manufacturing. And I save that. And then at Everett, I also have a group that does engineering, and maybe they have equipment. And then also at Everett, I have a lab that does calibration. And for us, maybe that's our primary standards lab. So all of this can be built out inside of that organizational structures so that we can think about this in the way that we think about our company and track assets, track users, all within that organizational structure. So you can see as I look at any part of that tree, I can look at the assets assigned to that portion of the tree, the members assigned there, and what they have access to when they're able to log into the system and view that information specific to their organization, as well as things like the dashboards that we'll have at the generic level when you log in. We'll also have those more specifically to a given part of the organization. So the next piece I'll talk about is kind of the core of what we would need to track in CalStudio, which is our assets. Inside of CalStudio, I can create asset records that are assigned to those various parts of either my end customers, if I'm a commercial lab doing commercial work, or in the initial launch of CalStudio, we're focusing on internal labs who are doing work for parts of their own organization. And so here you can see we're able to create assets, and from the beginning we can search for those customers or owners. Even if they're internal, they're still considered a customer. So if we look for our customer, here's Acme Manufacturing as our customer, and then here we're going to search within our product catalog to link this to a record there in terms of what type of asset it is. So maybe I'm adding a Fluke 77 meter, and when I search here, this is linked back to our product catalog with over 800,000 pieces of test and measurement devices with information like their manufacturer model, their description, in many cases, the specifications that are associated with that instrument, manuals, procedures. All of that is contained within that catalog, and we're able to link back to that at the asset level for a single source of truth where we can find that information. And then later on, when we talk about procedures and executing those procedures, it all ties into that same data that's available through the product catalog. So this is a really important part of what makes CalStudio work the way it does, is our ability to link back to that product catalog on every asset. And if there's something that's not in the product catalog, we can still create those and not link them back to a record there, but we're able to leverage that as much as we can to really benefit from those characteristics that we have there. So I've selected my asset from the catalog, and now I'm going to add the customer asset ID, and maybe they call this meter FLK123, and then the serial number is 11111. So now I've saved this asset, and now it's available in my list of assets. And if I look in this list of assets, I can click on any of these. And the next thing that I want to talk about is our sidebar on the right-hand side that shows a lot of this information about this asset without ever leaving this screen. And you'll see this across the rest of CalStudio, where when we have a list of records, we can peek and poke into those records inside of that list without navigating away to a new page, without leaving where we are. And what that is really great for is the ability to navigate much more effectively by not navigating at all. Or in the cases where we do need to go look more in depth, we can go to that record directly and it will open up that edit screen, or we can view the full profile for that. And then again, here we have, right, the sidebar pop out about the customer who owns that, about the information from the catalog that we linked back to. What we call this is omnidirectional data access, where we can get to anywhere from anywhere very quickly. One of the things we see within the calibration space is this need to do metrology forensics, where we have to hunt from one piece of information and find some other piece of information somewhere else. And so the goal here with this data access and the ability to peek and look at things and even make edits from those sidebars is really to make it simple to find where we're trying to go. So the next thing I'll cover is work events. And work events are a way to keep track of the work that we're doing in the lab, both at a top level of things like a group of assets coming in and thinking about things like what customer those are for, if we're going to do an on-site, what days we're going to be there, and then on each individual work item within that work event, information about what asset that's related to, what services we're going to provide. So all of that is contained within the work event and that kind of lower tier down of data in the work item. So we're going to create this work event here for our customer Aerospace Incorporated. And you can see we've got information like a purchase order. If this was related to a specific PO from the customer, we can enter that information here and capture that type of top level data about the work event. So we're going to move forward, and now we're going to come to this screen where we're going to select the assets that we're going to perform work on as our work items. And in this screen, you can see it's set up to use a barcode scanner. And not only can we scan the barcode that comes from CalStudio that's auto-generated, but also an asset ID that comes from the customer if they have their own barcode labeling, or the serial number from the manufacturer. So if you've seen the back of a Fluke meter where we have that barcode that has the serial number, you could scan that and it would still search based on that serial number for the records you have for this customer. So I'm going to come in here and just manually enter for now the assets I'm going to work on for this customer. And we're also going to show that if I try and enter or scan an asset that does not belong to this customer, it will not get added to this work event. So we're only able to add work for this customer that we're looking at right now that we've created this work event for. So there's no risk of selecting the wrong thing or going to the wrong customer's data. So now we're going to publish and open this work order. And now if I go look at this work order in the system, I can see the top level data here about my work event, as well as each of those individual work items. And again, in that work item, we can see data about that, as well as the asset, the service that we're going to perform, and the customer. So now the next area that we're going to go to actually perform this work is the calibration executive environment, which is called CalStudio Conduct. And this is available from that top left menu here. So we're going to go to that. And CalStudio Conduct is set up in a way that a technician logging into the system would have all the information available to them, not necessarily needing to log into the full LIMS and look at assets and work events from that top level perspective and create those records, but be able to log in as a technician and do the work very quickly and easily. So it's a separate environment, just like we have the MetCal Runtime and MetCal Editor. The CalStudio Conduct app is a separate screen to look at, a separate view, separate user experience that's also tied to that same login. So as we switch between these different apps, it's very seamless and we don't have to re-log in or have a different login. It's all connected. So if I look here, I can see my work event is in this list of work events. So I can see down here at the bottom, as part of this work event, those 3 work items I have that I just scanned in and created that work event for. And now looking from that, I can go back to my list here. I can start running a procedure for one of these. Another area of CalStudio that I want to talk about is our settings. So as a user that's logged in with the necessary permissions to look at these types of settings, there's a lot that we can configure in CalStudio from this area. So things like our number formats, right? Ensuring that that's matching whatever number format we want to use. Things like what our decimal separator is, what our thousand separator is, currency to use, date formats, all of that information. We can come into these settings and do that. And one of the key areas here is our system IDs. And so we're able to configure exactly how we want some of these auto-generated system IDs to look. So here, this top one is our barcode, right? So you can see we have all these different options for prefixes and different sequences within that. And I can change and configure. So if I want all of my barcodes to start with FLK for Fluke, I can come in here with a prefix of FLK. And if I want there to be a semicolon between that and the rest of the barcode, I can do that. And now in these other areas, right, we have options like a numeric, like a date, and we can add those as part of this and then configure that as well as the overall length of those different parts so that we can see exactly what it's going to look like down here at the bottom. And then as we create new assets, those will automatically be generated with that configuration in the way that we've defined it here. And that works for barcodes, for clients, for work events, all of that configured as we've got it here. We can also change things around how we search and filter, how we administer or how we use members, and all of that will be here in that same place around the settings for CalStudio. So another area that I want to talk about is our authoring environment. So just like we have the execution environment of CalStudio Conduct, we also have our authoring environment for procedures called CalStudio Compose. And in the same way, it's a separate app, separate user interface, separate user experience, but with the same login, same user account. And right off the bat, you can see we have this list of all these procedures that have been authored, and we can organize those into different areas, right? We can have folders in this structure to keep track of what type of procedure is this, what state is it in, and maybe I want to have a separate folder for things that are needing review or a separate folder for things that are in a given workbench or for a given technician. All of that can be handled here in the structure. And then as we go to create a procedure, you're going to see just how much easier it is to author procedures in CalStudio than any other offering that's out there from us or others. So the procedure authoring in CalStudio is a drag and drop, very simple approach to creating procedures. So on the left-hand side, you can see we've got a panel of different components that we can add to our procedure. And we also have that list is going to grow over time. So as we develop new functionality, we'll be able to add specific components. And we're starting with more generic components that allow us to cover a wide variety of equipment with a handful of these types of components. The first thing we need to do is add a section to our procedure. So I'm going to create this section, and maybe this is our DC voltage section. And we can name this and configure what that's going to look like. So on the right-hand side here, we can see that there's settings related to whether we want to make this a mandatory section to be able to complete the procedure, whether we want these to show up in the results, or there's something we want to capture and keep in the data in the back end. But all of that is configurable here on this right-hand side. And then we can have subsections within that. But here in this side of this section, I'm going to add a comparison test. So this comparison test is really the core of our starting point here as a procedure to perform an evaluation. Within that, we can set a minimum and maximum range with a unit, and maybe we have a nominal value here of 100 millivolts, and our lower limit of 99.95 and upper of 100.05. And we want to take 3 readings. And you can see the result types we want to allow here. Can we skip this? Can we given indeterminate, or is this just a matter of checking off the box that we performed this? So as we build this, you're seeing that what we see here in the authoring environment is mirroring what we're going to see when we go to run this procedure. So these 3 reading boxes that we have here are exactly what we're going to show in that same configuration when we go to run this procedure. So that's a big kind of step forward in how we think about authoring procedures. Is from the very beginning, we're going to be able to see what our technician's going to see when they run this, as well as what the results are going to look like on the other end. So it's a consistent interface across all 3 phases of that, so that we know exactly what to expect on the other end in what we give back to our customer as a report of what work has been done. So you can see currently we have a list of a few components we can use, but as we move forward and add support for communicating with instruments or for specific devices, we can create special components for those different types of functionality where it's appropriate, and having things that are much more specified. But we also start with, from the beginning, these more generic components that allow us to really test any type of evaluation, so that we can always cover everything that you need to cover in that. And now if we save this, we can also, it needs a name. If we save this, we can see that it's listed here in this draft state. If I go back and look at this and edit it, I can preview this and show exactly what it's going to look like when I run it. Right? I can try and run that in the validation state that we'll have available as we move forward. And now I can also change this from a draft into a published state. So until I do that, this isn't available to technicians in the execution environment. Only things that are published and are available to them will be visible there when they go to run a procedure for actually performing work. So this provides a really good threshold to make sure that procedures that are still in work or haven't been validated yet aren't available to anyone outside of people who have access to the authoring environment. So when we save that, you can see that this status here has changed to published. And now this would be visible inside of the execution environment for a technician to use. In the future, things will be tied to additional characteristics, like what specifically in terms of what models or what categories of instruments are these procedures tied to, or what training requirements are there for a technician to have before they can run this particular procedure. But that all kind of ties together in the same way here as with this as a starting point. So this has been an introduction to CalStudio. Really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. And if you want more information, feel free to reach out to your sales representative or to me directly.